She stepped off the train with a suitcase full of hope, a secondhand dress, a worn letter from a man who said he was ready for a wife, and a quiet prayer that maybe this time, she wouldn't be turned away. But the platform was empty. The man she was meant to marry had wed another. Just 2 weeks before she arrived. No note, no apology, not even a glance. And yet there they were, three children watching her from behind a broken fence. One held a biscuit like an offering. One whispered mama before she even spoke her name. They didn't know her story, but somehow they chose her. And when the man returned proud and married, he didn't expect to see his children standing behind the woman he abandoned. Didn't expect them to ask with soft rebellion, can she stay instead? Because sometimes love doesn't knock. It waits in silence until someone brave enough answers a door no one thought to open. She'd sown her reply in simple sentences. Her only claim that she'd never stopped believing in family, even when her own had shut their door on her 2 decades ago. But when she stepped off the train into the hollow wind and saw the church bell tower, broken, the saloon shutters swinging but empty, and only a gangly 12-year-old boy sitting atop a rail post, she knew something was wrong. The boy was staring at her. His shirt was torn, freckles fresh across his brow. He didn't smile, didn't wave. Just said, "You the one Pa wrote to, 'cause he already married Miss Della last week. But we was waiting for you." Josephine didn't speak. Her heart didn't crack, it folded. She looked around. Not a soul in town, just wine through old bones. The boy stepped down quieter now. "We made a place in the barn. You can still come, if you want." And in that moment, the strange ache of not being chosen and still being needed settled into her ribs like a quiet dog laying down for the night. She came looking for a husband. But maybe, just maybe, someone else had been looking for her all along. The barn was warmer than she expected. Not in temperature, it was late spring, and the nights still held their chill, but in feeling. Someone had cleared space in the loft, laid down 2 quilts, and a faded pillow that smelled faintly of cedar and flower. Josephine set her trunk down without a sound. Below her, she could hear the goats shifting their hooves, clacking soft against wood. Somewhere a baby coughed. The boy who brought her here, Eli, he'd told her, came back up the ladder with a dented tin lantern and a can of peaches. "They're not cold," he said, offering it like a truce, "but they're yours." She took it without opening it. "Where's your father?" Eli shifted. "With Miss Della. She don't like company after supper." Then after a beat, he added, "But she don't like us neither." There it was, the fracture beneath the frame. Josephine sat, her body aching from the ride, from the years, from being chosen and unchosen, all in the span of a whistle stop. Eli sat on the edge of the loft floor, legs dangling, a boy not quite old enough to lie well and too old to pretend he didn't know what had just happened. "We waited for you," he said again, quieter this time. "Why?" she asked finally. His shoulders lifted. "Because you wrote the letter, and your words sounded kind, and we don't got kind no more." In the hush that followed, Josephine thought of all the letters she'd ever written. None had mattered much until now. She reached into her satchel, pulled out the last letter Marshall had sent, and lit the lantern higher. She read it again aloud, this time so the boy could hear. "We are not looking for perfection," Marshall had written. "Just someone who knows how to stay when others leave." She folded it slowly. "Well, she said I'm here." Eli gave a nod, like it wasn't triumph, but relief. And somewhere down below, a small girl's voice called Mama. Josephine didn't answer, but her hand pressed gently over her chest where something long gone had stirred. She came for a man, but found a child whispering Mom in the dark, and she didn't correct her. Josephine kept to the barn for the first 4 nights. She rose with the sun, swept the porch before Della could scowl at the dust, drew water from the well before anyone asked. She boiled grits without being told. Not as a servant, but because it seemed cruel to let children go hungry just because their stepmother could not bear to feed what wasn't hers. Marshall didn't speak to her directly. Not since that stunned moment at the station when her name caught in his throat like a stone. He moved like a man bracing for a storm, keeping busy with fences, horses, silence. And still the children came. Eli brought her books with corners chewed by mice. Annie, the small one, snuck her a daisy she'd pressed flat inside the Psalms. And on the 5th evening, Thomas, the quiet middle boy, placed her burned letter on the hay beside her like an offering. "I saved it," he whispered. even when Papa threw it in the stove. I pulled it out before the whole thing burned. It was blackened along the edges, words missing, but the heart still there. She touched the fragile paper. It trembled like something alive. Then a voice from behind that letter was never meant to come back. It was Marshall, hat in his hands, hair too long at the temples. "You wrote those things before you knew me," he said. "Before you saw all this." Josephine looked up and her gaze did not flinch. "I wrote them hoping someone would need them," she said gently. "Turns out your children did." His eyes softened barely. Then he turned and walked out again. But that night the door to the house wasn't locked. She didn't enter, but the gesture sat with her all night, like a question waiting for an answer. He left the door open, but would she walk through it, knowing she was never meant to be invited? It was Annie who finally took Josephine's hand. The little girl appeared just after dawn, barefoot and blinking, holding a tin cup of warm milk. Her braid was half undone, eyes wide with something unspoken. "Della's gone," she whispered. "She left in the night. Didn't say goodbye." Josephine blinked, slow and steady. Annie pressed the cup into her palms and whispered, "Mama used to warm the milk like this too." It was the first time anyone in that house had said the word mama in Josephine's presence. She sat very still on the barn step, the cool earth beneath her bare feet grounding her. "Who made your hair so neat this morning?" she asked softly. "Eli did," Annie said proudly. "He's bad at it, but he tried." A pause. "Will you come in now?" Annie asked. "The house feels quiet, like it's waiting." Josephine swallowed something hard and ancient in her throat. She rose, walked barefoot across the yard, up the porch. Her hand hovered on the doorknob. It turned without resistance. Inside, dishes waited in the basin. Thomas swept the floor with a broom too tall for him. Eli stirred a pot of something thin and brown. They all looked up as she entered. No one spoke, but 3 sets of shoulders dropped just slightly like breath, returning to a tired body. Marshall wasn't there, and maybe that was best. She set the tin cup down, rolled her sleeves and said, "Let's start fresh. Not with orders, not with fear, but with presence." Later that evening, the children fell asleep in a heap on the floor beside the hearth. Josephine didn't move them. She sat nearby and read aloud from one of the chewed-up books Eli had brought, her voice calm, unhurried, like a stream smoothing stone. The wind outside shifted, not gone, but softer. And then came a sound she hadn't expected. The back door creaked. Bootsteps. Hesitant. Then stillness. Marshall's voice gruff and low. "I wasn't sure you'd come inside." Josephine didn't turn. "I didn't do it for you," she said. "I did it for them." A pause. "Good," he said. "They need someone who won't leave." And somehow she knew he wasn't only talking about the children. He didn't ask her to stay. But what comes next might be the first time she chooses for herself. Josephine had once believed love came in grand gestures, letters in silk ribbons, promises under lantern light. But in this crooked, creaking house, it came in scraped knees, burnt stew, and the weight of a quiet child's head resting on her lap. She didn't speak of Della. Neither did the children. Not even Marshall, though he sometimes lingered in the doorway, longer than necessary, as if unsure whether he belonged. Josephine cooked, swept, sat, stayed. And slowly they reached for her, not all at once, but like wild deer testing a new path. One evening Eli tugged at her skirt. "Will you come see the fence I fixed?" She followed him to the western field where 2 crooked posts stood upright, tied with twine and a boy's determination. "I did it 'cause you said if we fix small things, big things come easier," he said. Josephine swallowed, touched the splintered wood gently. "You listened." He nodded. "You're different from Della. She liked her mirror more than our names." And there it was, the crack in the silence, the truth rising like dust in the light. "She said she never wanted to be here," Thomas said later, folding clothes beside her. You never said anything. You just stayed." Josephine didn't answer. Her hands kept folding. But inside something stirred. Not pride, not victory, just ache. For all the children who'd learned not to expect anyone to stay. That night she found Marshall on the porch, jaw set against the horizon. "She was the mayor's daughter," he said. "Came out here thinking she'd be a queen. I offered her this land, But she wanted a life I couldn't give. He looked at Josephine, and for the first time she saw him, not just the man who'd made a mistake, but the man who was trying to make it right without words. She left the ring on the Bible, he added. Didn't even say goodbye to the children. Josephine's voice was quiet, they noticed. And in that silence between them, neither accusation nor comfort, a fragile understanding settled. She stood. You don't have to explain anything to me, Marshall. I know, he said. But he did anyway. Because sometimes a man has to speak the hurt aloud before healing can begin. The house was beginning to feel less like a place they lived in, and more like a place that remembered them. But would Josephine dare believe she belonged here too? The morning broke soft like a hymn hummed beneath a breath. Josephine stood at the stove apron. Damp hair swept back. The air smelled of cornbread and something warmer, maybe acceptance. She hadn't planned to stay this long, hadn't meant to unpack more than her hands. But her boots now sat by the door. Her stitching lined the curtains. Her name, whispered in small voices, belonged to someone real. Miss Jo Sadie said, padding into the kitchen with her thumb still in her mouth. Can you brush my hair like you did yesterday? Josephine set the spoon down. Of course, sweetheart. And that was how the day began, not with a demand but a request. Not because she was needed, but because she was wanted. By mid-morning, Marshall appeared with a crate of firewood. He didn't speak right away. He simply set it down and waited. Thinking of leaving, he asked, finally, not looking at her. I was, she replied, honest as the sky. But something changed. He swallowed. Was it the children? She smiled faintly. They made room for me. He nodded. I never asked you to stay. No, she said. You didn't. That's why I might. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was full, alive with things unspoken. Pain, regret, hope. That evening, Marshall found her in the garden. The rows were uneven, but green things had started to poke through. I don't know how to fix what happened, he said softly, but I can promise not to repeat it. Josephine turned hands in the dirt. I'm not here to be a second chance. I'm here to be a first choice. Marshall nodded slowly, as if letting that truth settle deep. Then from the porch, a small voice called out, Mama, look. It was Eli holding a drawing he'd made. In it, a woman stood in front of a crooked house, 5 small hands reaching for her. Who's that? Josephine asked gently. You, Eli said. You stayed. She had arrived as a placeholder, but somehow without promises or plans became the place itself. But could Marshall give her not just a home, but a heart? The first frost dusted the window panes like quiet forgiveness. In the hush of dawn, Josephine moved through the kitchen, setting mugs out for cocoa, her hands remembering the rhythm of morning before her own life had cracked in half. Outside, Marshall was chopping wood. The swing of his axe was no longer about duty, it was about staying. He had not asked again, not once. No more apologies, no more attempts to fill the silence with explanations, and that was what allowed the silence to heal. That evening, he stepped onto the porch where she was rocking beside Sadie, a blanket around both their shoulders. I've been thinking, he said. There's a spare lot behind the barn. It's yours if you want it. To build, or plant, or leave empty. Yours either way. She looked at him. The kind of long, quiet look that sees a man's heart even if he never puts it into words. I don't need land, she said softly. I just needed a place where no one tried to name me before I could name myself. He nodded, not speaking. Later that night, as the fire dimmed, she found her letter, the one she'd carried from the station, now soft at the edges. She unfolded it, not to reread the pain, but to let it go. Then she reached for a blank sheet of paper. Her handwriting was slower now, more certain. Dear Miss Josephine, you are not what was left behind. You are what stayed. You are not chosen in place of someone else. You are chosen, just you, and that is enough. She placed the letter in her drawer. No return address, no stamps, only a future waiting to be lived. And outside, laughter drifted from the barn, Eli and Sadie chasing fireflies in the night, Marshall's deep voice rising with theirs. Josephine stepped out into the dark, her heart lighter than it had been in decades. Not rescued, not redeemed, but rooted. She was meant to be someone's placeholder, but became the heart of a home instead. And this time she stayed because she was free to choose. Would you like to follow more stories of women who chose to stay and were chosen in return. Sometimes the love we long for doesn't come in a ribbon-tied package or the arms we were promised. Sometimes it finds us in the most unexpected faces, a shy child offering half a biscuit, a broken fence that somehow still holds, or the quiet gaze of someone who stays when they could have walked away. She came to marry a man, but what she found was a family that hadn't known how to ask for a mother and a chance to become something more than what the world had labeled her. In our own lives, we might not step off a dusty train into a ghost town, but many of us know what it feels like to be left behind, to be forgotten, to feel like our story was already written without us. And yet, like her, we can choose to stay, to rebuild, to plant something gentle in the ruins. If this story touched your heart, we invite you to subscribe to the channel None, Wild West Saga, where quiet stories of healing kindness and late blooming love are still waiting to be told. Share this with someone who believes in second chances, and let us know in the comments, would you like to see what happened after she stayed? Or, do you want more stories like this about women who weren't chosen first, but who became the heart of everything we're listening, always?